This is my annual Cryptology news and review update and historical vignette. I will not be presenting section 4 bibliography, but it'll be in the documents uploaded to Jabber later. I will repeat the quote I had from last year: abundance of caution is C-suite lingo for oopsie, oh flying squirrel. Back in December, the Let's Encrypt people announced that they're going from 90-day certs to offering also 6-day certs if you're using the automatic renewal scripts, which is a way of solving the revocation problem. They self-cancel in 6 days anyway. So if it's been compromised, it rolls over, you get a new one that's uncompromised if you fix, whatever compromised it, and off you go. No revocation list, no revocation checking protocol. And this effectively was their 10th anniversary celebration. If Slashdot hated it and Bruce Schneer liked it, I think I like it. They've also added IP address certificates, which is sort of like secure DNS, but isn't, and turned off their online certificate status protocol, which is the dynamic online alternative to revocation. And with renewal automation working, they've turned off their expiration notification, and they're phasing out their certificate transparency logs because they now have static certificate transparency API, and they'll kill it as the browsers catch up to using it so that there isn't a problem. And there's a typo. Okay. If it weren't on the last line of the slide, you'd see it auto update because I've got a, see, it updated, plug-in refreshing the screen every 5 or 20 seconds or something. In previous years, I've talked about what US national standards have been doing with new cryptography standards, and we'll cover the updates on that later. Well, the UK National Computer Security Center issued a white paper on advanced cryptography, which isn't the Post Quantum Cryptography. It's things which extend protection beyond data at rest and data in motion for protecting data while it's being processed, which is interesting because I have seen papers about homomorphic encryption, which allows you to add two encrypted numbers and get the encrypted number of the sum. And I've had skeptical reactions to that because of the, you remember me showing the Linux Penguin GIF encrypted by electronic codebook, and well, you don't get the colors, but you get the shape perfectly clearly because each of the pixels is encrypted, its color is encrypted to a unique value because it was a flat colored diagram. Anyway, so I'm not, I'll be interested to see what they come up with. So there's lots of interesting things being suggested there. National Institute of Standards revised the password rules so that it's anybody that's still requiring you to have your password changed every 90 days is operating on doubly obsolete guidance. They should take a look at the 2024 federal, and Bruce Schneier reported on the draft password rules in a nice readable fashion. A phrase that I borrowed from Bruce and the rest of the cryptologic community. I'm going to turn off the refresh because it's bothering me. There we go. Attacks only get better. No. I can't select text if the mouse advances the slide. Attacks only get better is a mantra in cryptology because that's between technological advance and just people thinking more, inspired by what used to work. We're going to find more and better ways. So we have it's an arms race. We have to keep improving things. Well, people have been looking at what massive clusters of GPUs that are currently being collected along with these things called NPUs for artificial ignorance, global warming amplification centers, what they can be used for to do cryptanalytic work. I just need to scroll. We've talked about Tetra before. That's a real protocol used in like police radios. We were talking about that earlier. And this research looked at the GPRS, which is in, and GSM, which are in certain cell phones, and your RFID tags. And these are the cryptographic protocols used in those. And they showed that some key sizes for some of these protocols are within brute force capability of a state scale actor cluster of GPUs or other hypothetical specialized hardware. And many of the others will be by 2050. So these systems are going to need to increase their key sizes or go to some other form of encryption. And of course, the other problem is if state scale actors can save messages that aren't within their budget to break today, they can break them when it suddenly becomes more important to break it so the budget is available, or when Moore's law gets them a today's massive GPU cluster at a moderate price in 5 or 10 years. So this is applying to real things, things that we actually use, like cell phones and RFID tags, and also like the police encrypted radios we were talking about earlier are also attackable by state size or megacorp size opponents. Yeah, okay. Now, I've previously talked about what to use instead of GPG, PGP, and for secure messengers, and the like. And I've left links to the previous discussion, so I'm not going to repeat everything I've said before. There was a nice blog post last November by a independent cryptologist who reports vulnerabilities, who goes by use case, because the biggest problem with PGP is when we only had one hammer, we used it to pound nails, screws, nuts, tie rods, and fiber optics, all with the same hammer. And PGP didn't fit a lot of those. And frankly, its user interface was usually terrible, even for what it was originally designed for. So looking at each of the kinds of secure messaging you might want, what the best available tools were 10 months ago, 9 months ago? Yeah. Don't do live math on the air. And it's a very good article. And in April, a Neiman lab, which I guess is doing some sort of technology for journalists or progressives or something, posted a blog post, How to Leak to a Journalist. And it's a very nice article, recommend reading it. The tool I didn't read is Secure Drop, which I hadn't heard of, Signal, and the various whistleblower support services. And I love this graphic that got picked up from the government operation that reported we have good OPSEC on this after an Atlantic journalist had been accidentally added to the Signal group because he and somebody with the same last name were in the defense secretary's phone's contact list, and he added the wrong one to the Signal group chat. Yeah, don't do that. And the thing to remember is that Telegram group chats are not secure. They're not encrypted. Only one-to-one is encrypted, maybe good enough with Telegram. Signal, it is encrypted n-ways, but if anybody on the chat adds somebody that doesn't belong on the chat to the chat, the whole chat's compromised. If it hurts when you do that, don't do that. But I love the graphic. Section 2, what's up with Post Quantum Cryptography? This is one of our running features. We'll do a bit of review here with, that we didn't do on the last bit. Quantum computing is using quantum superposition, which is, Schrodinger's cat is both dead and alive until you look, for computing purposes. Quantum computing is measured in qubits, not bits. A qubit is not binary. It's not a floating point number. It's got a value that its probability, its binary value is true, and a complementary probability of its binary value being false, which can vary over the computation as it converges. There are two types of quantum hardware. Quantum annealing gets big qubit counts, great for hyperbolic publicity announcements by IBM and their competitor, and is good for certain kinds of business problems. Traveling salesman, bingo. Quantum annealing 512-bit qubit system can do a lot better on traveling salesman than any classical computer. That doesn't that doesn't cause problems for classical cryptography. The problems that I'm concerned with are the quantum circuit or quantum logic computers, which have been so far made practical only with a relatively small number of qubits and have a scaling problem that the decoherence of the qubits increases faster than scaling, and so the technologies used to repair decoherence aren't keeping up. And it's unclear if it's actually going to scale, even though people talk about it as if it's just an engineering problem. So why are we discussing post-quantum cryptography before quantum computing, quantum cryptography has really taken off? It's theoretically possible to use entangled quantum states to break classical encryption, particularly the public key infrastructure on which all of our monetary commerce is currently based. So that we've got standards processes in flight to come up with post-quantum cryptography that would use classical computing, not requiring quantum hardware, to do encryptions that would resist quantum cryptanalysis using nation state or megacorp purchased quantum computing hardware in order to crack crypto. And you know, at the kinds of money that gets passed around in some of the larger transactions, a merely large criminal syndicate could afford to buy a Google quantum computer to try to hack it because it'd pay off. The three algorithms that were normally discussed are Shor's algorithm, Grover's algorithm, and I forgot what the V stands for, but it's a one of the splitting field algorithms for factoring. Discrete log as well as prime number based RSA, and even the modern elliptic curve public key infrastructure are all theoretically targetable by quantum cryptography. So everything pretty much that we had fielded in websites as of 2 years ago was in danger if this quantum computing actually scales. And there was a boost in Shor's algorithm capability a year ago, January. Just what we need, and somebody else is working on reducing the memory penalty. So it's just getting stronger. As they said, attacks always get better. This is still theoretical. Now, in news, Google has announced their Willow quantum computing, and BBC even bought off on the hype, calling it mind-boggling. But the MSN network said it's hidden behind a questionable benchmark. And they claim to have below threshold quantum error correction, but it doesn't really meet the smell test that when experts look at their detailed claims, it may not be scaling. It may not be holding coherence long enough to do anything useful. So they've still got work to do. They've hyped it so the stock price jumped and blah, blah, blah. But this has potential that it could grow into something problematic. So why are we worried today? Well, NSA has already set up a data center in Utah that's saving something. What's it saving? Probably the stuff that was getting out of the San Francisco Long Line Switching Center. Anything they scarf encrypted off of the internet or text over the cell phone services. This isn't the first time. We saved Russian spy messages during World War II and decrypted them at leisure after World War II, having discovered a flaw in their supposedly unbreakable one-time pad by using not computers, just IBM accounting machines, tabulators, offline punch card tally devices. And I reported on that in a previous tier, footnote will get you there. And I reported previously that about this data farm, which has been there for 12 years now, saving stuff. Archive.org saves stuff, but they don't save encrypted stuff. But, you know, anybody that's capable of putting together a business park size RAID array can save encrypted stuff until it becomes decryptable. If these quantum computers start being able to break RSA shielded or elliptical pair shielded session key exchanges, anything that's been slurped since 2013 could be broken in retrospect. See, was there anything more there? No. Okay. So the old Bureau of Standards, National Institute of Standards and Technology, started the Post Quantum Cryptography Initiative, similar to how they did the AES and SHA-3 competitions. And that's been ongoing for years. And progress has been made. But, you know, you can't rush it. One of the candidates had a side channel attack. So when they do these competitions, the people that propose one crypto system gang up on all the other crypto systems and try to break the competitors, because the best way to gauge the strength of a crypto system is to cryptanalyze it, to try to break it. So if the best attack on it is after it's been attacked for a couple of years by some of the best minds in the industry, is really weak, like it only works on a 2-round version of the 6-round Feistel or whatever, it's probably good enough, at least for a while. You know, as commented previously, the side channel attacks such as dilithium crystals Kyber can be used to extract the key or the algorithm from a piece of equipment that falls into the bad guy's lab. That's not good. So that's why we care. One of the entrants, 62 of the 69 entrants were broken, including 2 front runners. Non-random numbers are an ongoing problem. So we need, you know, so the fact that Falcon isn't resistant to non-random salting or repeated use with the same values is problematic. It could fail it could be completely compromised with fairly common real world failures. So maybe we want something stronger than that. So here, this is a slightly updated timeline. Just before I presented last year, they announced FIPS standards, the initial FIPS standards for post quantum cryptography. These are now FIPS allowed, not yet mandated. And they are FIPS 203, 204, and 205. And they announced that they would have at least one, probably several more. And they started round 2 of the digital signature competition. The fourth key exchange standard, a second key exchange standard was selected in March, and the Falcon signature was submitted standard. So it's a submitted draft at the end of August. So it's not an announced standard yet, but it will be FIPS 206 when it completes internal review. Next week, the 6th Post Quantum Computing Standardization Competition Conference will occur. The conference page has the full agenda. There are 2 sessions on cryptanalysis of round 2, as well as presentations by all of the proponents. The cryptanalysis, of course, is by the other proponents. There'll be certification either late this year or next year for the standards. And eventually they will disapprove everything older and have federal systems required to use the PQC algorithms and not the PQC legacy algorithms. And that will set best practice for the rest of us. This is a description of the Falcon, and it looks like it was side channel timing that, in addition to the non-random random numbers issue that held up its drafting. The candidates for the second round of digital signatures, it's a long list, 14 of them, a couple of which have cute names. Oh, I like mayo. Goes nicely with lettuce and tomato. The Future 207 is a Hamming quasi-cyclic key exchange mechanism, which is planned as a backup for the primary chosen key exchange mechanism. It uses radically different mathematical structures, so it's unlikely both would be compromised in the same set of years. It would require different breakthroughs. The other fourth round contenders are sidelined. Psych is broken, so it's not happening. Bike was a close contender for the backup and could be brought in again. Classic McAleese is likely to be standardized, but ISO International Standards is taking the lead on standardizing that. And it has the disadvantage that its keys are very, very large for in comparison to what it's going to accomplish. And they said that the Hamming quasi-cyclic HQC had the simplest hardness assumptions. You didn't have to assume the world in order to assume it was safe. So I like their reasoning for the choice out of these four. We may see bike standardized in the US eventually as a backup. And if ISO standardizes McAleese, NIST will probably endorse it for FIPS and civilian use also eventually. But we've got one being pushed for immediate use standard, and one is the backup be ready to use standard. So that's good. Non-quantum related, NIST has called for comments on their updating their previous white paper regarding random number generators. As noted, if it says 7777, that's a problem. And so it's a good thing to discuss. And AES, they're proposing a variant of 256 block with 256 static key size. I'm not sure why static key size. Comment period is closed. I may want to read the comments sometime to find out why this is even a thing. That's the other non-quantum things going on in cryptography at NIST. Okay, oh, I didn't put in a one-line summary. Well, I should do that later. So tonight we're discussing the Battle of Midway and how cryptology won the Battle of Midway. Well, I mean, don't tell the naval aviators that. They want to take credit, but they wouldn't have been in the right place without the cryptologists. The too long didn't read is that the Battle of Midway was supposed to be a surprise attack with landing and takeover by Imperial Japanese Navy, Marines, Army. But it wasn't a surprise, and it wasn't an invasion. That's the summary. So this is spring 1942, just a few months after the Pearl Harbor total surprise attack, wherein we didn't see it coming because we hadn't broken the right codes of theirs yet. We'd broken some others, which they weren't transmitting in because they were keeping radio silence, and they were pretending their ships were someplace they weren't with units that weren't radio silent. So we had no clue where they were. That's why Pearl Harbor surprise attack worked. So in spring of 42, the Pearl Harbor cryptologists had joined the rest of the Navy cryptologists in attacking the primary Japanese Navy code. They had been working on the flag officer's variant of it previously, and there weren't enough messages to make progress on it. So they joined the main effort, and rapid progress was made. They figured out that place name code names for Hawaiian islands all started with A. AH was the island of Hawaii. K was the island of Kauai, etc. The decoded operational plan message showed that the upcoming attack late May, early June was going to be at location AF, Alpha Foxtrot. Well, if there was any consistency, which the IJN, Imperial Japanese Navy, seemed to show that they had a consistency in arranging things like this. It ought to be someplace nearby. Midway is sort of near Hawaii. It's called Midway because it's midway between Hawaii and anything else. So the initial inference is AF is probably Midway. We haven't seen either an A code or a something else code that was obviously Midway. And in terms of what they say they plan to do, it sort of makes sense for Midway better than other places. But this logical inference wasn't good enough for the admirals to send carriers racing around the Pacific looking for trouble on. So they sent an encoded message to commander at Midway, telling them to radio on a plain text channel that they were low of fresh water, which would imply their desalination plant was behaving badly. And this was a problem, did do something to fix it, please? Which the radio station at Midway did. And as expected, the IJN, Imperial Japanese Navy Radio Intercept Service, picked up this transmission in plain English, translated it, encoded it in their fleet code, and which was intercepted and decrypted, and said AF low on water, which demonstrated AF was indeed Midway. GRG, I guess that's Greg, asks, literally AF? Yes. Because kana and kanji are bothersome in Morse code, Latin letters are and Latin, as it were, Morse code numerals tend to be used to represent Japanese syllables or Japanese words, so that yes, they had a syllabary of Japanese syllables in the code, so that you didn't have to go down to all the way to Latin letters to spell out a Japanese word that didn't have a code group. You could use the syllables. Each possible syllable had a code word, and string together a word that way. But they could spell individual English, Russian, whatever words, and the like with Latin letters. And so, yes, they were using Latin letters for their map grid codes. Given the difficulty of typing katakana or kanji, and even worse, sending it as Morse code, yeah, I guess that makes sense. So this was Pearl Harbor's revenge. The station Hypo, the Navy cryptological unit at Pearl Harbor, this is not a really secure cryptonym, Hypo. Hypo starts with H, Harbor starts with H. The group at Cavity had a code word starting with C. Navy headquarters had a code word starting with N. Yeah, not the best cryptonyms, but whatever. So they got shifted, as I said before, to JN25B, the operational code, having been previously been on the JN25 variant for admiral-to-admiral communications, which, predictably, admirals didn't talk to each other that much. And it takes multiple messages in roughly the same key in order to break in. So they weren't making any traction there. So, good to shift them over. While it says B in the U.S. Navy indicator JN25B, in the Japanese records, B was the third edition of the code book with this structure. But apparently we hadn't seen messages in the first edition, or not enough of them to break in far enough to know that it was the same system. This is what's called a 5-digit code. I think it was a 2-part code, but I'm not sure. So there would be 5 numerals replacing a word or phrase. This was super enciphered by what's called an additive key, which means after you transcribed your Japanese message into a series of 5-digit numbers, you would take another sequence of 5-digit numbers taken from a list of random 5-digit numbers, line them up underneath each other, and add them with non-carrying addition. And an indicator would have to be added to the message to indicate where in the booklet or key table of additive, also called an additive book, you started. And you should start in a different place for each message, and preferably don't overlap messages. The key table or additive books were issued, I think, monthly, and the code books were reissued maybe 4 times a year, if lucky. But delays in logistics would delay the cutover, so that it might be in use for longer than planned. When Pearl Harbor hopped on this around Christmas of '41, a couple of weeks after Pearl Harbor, Cavite and Navy headquarters had already made some progress. So they had a head start with a partial key table and a partial code book, and could put their manpower, and this being a Navy bunker, yes, it was all men, unlike the Army code breaking group was largely women in Washington, D.C., and the Navy had a bunch of waves as well. Don't think they had civilian women at Navy. Army had both civilian and women's auxiliary uniformed. But in Pearl Harbor, this is a Wiener Fest down in the bunker underneath Navy headquarters. Now, Pearl Harbor as an outstation was better equipped with IBM 405 tabulators than Navy headquarters had been a year earlier, because the guy who introduced use of tabulators to cryptanalysis, the first person in the world to use Hollerith card tabulators for cryptology, was the previous head of the Navy Comms Research Desk crypto group at Navy headquarters, and he moved to Station Hypo. He put in a requisition for a tabulator for his new post, which was in the bunker, so was reserved for just them. Whereas at Navy headquarters, they had to share. And the nice thing is that 80 columns is divisible by 5-figure groups or 4-figure groups for the easier lower level codes, So you get an even number of code groups per card. And with the patch panel, these machines could be programmed to search for coincidences of the same enciphered code groups within a message or within different messages, but also do subtractions. So you can subtract each group of a message from each other group in the message and come up with a list of differences, which could then be reported and indexed and cross-referenced. And they could do statistics, and they could do adjacency, and they could also have cards punched that have the decoded absolute plain code group. Plain code is an abbreviation of plain code group. ENSA code is an abbreviation for enciphered code group. And so they could do partial translations into Japanese at least, and maybe even into English on the machine before handing it to the linguists to continue breaking. Here we have an example of the method of differences. You've got 5 messages which have similar indicators which indicate they likely overlap. If the indicator has either been deciphered from a covering encipherment or was a actual raw position in the key table, then if 6216 is the indicator for message 2, well, that means we shift it 2 places to the left of everybody that's starting with 6218. A through J are separate messages that are believed to have overlapping key. And only a couple of columns differences are shown here. Column A's differences are a triangular array, as are column E's. In reality, you'd have a triangle for each of the 10 columns, and the ones that continue off to the right, because these messages are longer than 10 groups, usually. And with just these 2, we have 2 differences, 8801 and 5909 appear in as differences among values in both columns A and E, which suggests they are the same code group being used in a different position in the 2 messages, covered by a different random key group. And running that subtraction out, gives you relative code values and allows breaking to begin at a semantic level, which is called book breaking. The first step for the to get it ready for book breaking is stripping off the additive. Lots of dirty puns based on stripping here. Yeah. Navy guys, they made those puns. And if most or all of the current key table has been already figured, then the tabulating machine can do the stripping to absolute plain code groups, placode. If not, it's run to relatives. But either way, then the stripped version of the message is sent to the linguists who do the book breaking, and they use between the already known groups that are can be translated as decodes and the context of the message, when it was sent, from where, what's the military situation in the Pacific right now? All those things as context for the linguists. They could basically do an n-dimensional crossword puzzle looking for not letters that overlap, but words or phrases that overlap between messages. And not just overlapping words, but if this word would make sense in this message, then the difference for this column means that these other messages should have these other code values. If this is a right guess, do those values make sense in the gap in the adjacent messages? If it's a cheap one book code, where the code values and the plain language values alphabetize in the same sequence, so you don't have to have a separate decoding book or at the back upside down, then there's a big hint that if this code group is between these other two that you already know, then the explanation value is going to be between them alphabetically also. So basically, after World War I, nobody but commercial telegram codes continued to use that. So here's an example which one particular book uses to show this process. If you have three messages that are in depth, that is to say their keys overlap at least partially, and the key table is unknown for a stretch of 5 groups in the middle of all 3 of them, the fact that number 2 is an inventory of aviation bombs of various kinds suggests that the next value is going to probably be large bombs, but it might be one of the other 3 or 4 kinds of bombs that they keep count of. And if large bombs works there, what's the implied code group for the same common difference in the other 2 messages? Does it work there? Yes, it does. Oh, very nice. Well, that suggests something for the in one of the other messages, which saves us having to try every single group for a large integer in the middle message, and it gives us that one. And then we put in time delay bomb, and well, that doesn't work, so it's the 4th kind of bomb, and continue. And now we've recovered 5 more groups of key and 15 more groups of code. And you can see how this is sort of like crosswords, except with words and related words that are related in a really strange way in a fantasy multidimensional space. And when I turn this over with a little cleanup to Jobber for upload, it'll have links to all the previous talks in this series, and it will have the news and focus sections will have footnotes inline, and the history, this is the same as it is every year. The glossary for the magic words, and it will have bibliography of my sources for this presentation, linkable. Now, a lot of these, you can't download the book from Internet Archive. You may be able to borrow it for half an hour, or you may only be able to search inside it, but that lets you see the page I was looking at. Good enough. So anybody that wants to follow along, and there will also be a version with advanced notes for many of the slides, as a document, as opposed to as slides. So that'll all be available in a month or 3 or whenever it's uploaded. So that's what I have prepared for a historical vignette as well as the news. Jerry says in NAM we use the Jack Benny method of transmitting frequencies. There were a lot of talk around systems. The Navajo code talkers are the most famous on voice radio, but there were a couple other tribes that contributed some code talkers for separate nets, and more recently, UN had a Irish battalion in the Congo, and their radio comms were in Gaelic. It was generally considered the most secure radio net in the Congo.
Okay. Jack Benny was a rather complicated. It was designed to be used by helicopter pilots. And if anybody knows a helicopter, pilot had 5 controls he had to use all simultaneously. You had the stick, the collective, the throttle, and your 2 feet. So you didn't have much. Jack Benny was, we gave the frequencies as an offset of Jack Benny, and Jack Benny was 39. That was his joke. He was always 39 years old.
Absolutely. We should all be 39 still.
Yep.
Questions? Either unmute yourself or type it in the chat. I didn't notice Federico join, unfortunately, but I'm going to give a shout out to Federico because one of the books in the bibliography there we go. Federico gave me a copy of Joe Rochefort's War after he collaborated with me on a previous codebook project for one of these meetings. He brought in a commercial telegram codebook that he'd acquired, and I brought in one I'd acquired, and we passed both of them around the room, and we got both of them back. I guess there weren't any Italian diplomats joke about certain countries' proclivities toward safe-cracking version of cryptology. The Army cryptology got really angry with naval intelligence who broke into a Japanese consulate to steal photos of the code books, because if they noticed we were doing break and enters, they might have changed their purple machine as well as changing the code book. And we really didn't want them changing a machine that we'd crack, so we didn't want to make them think we might have grabbed photos of the inside of one. So, yeah, don't break in again, please. Navy agreed not to break in again without letting the Army have a chance to break the code book before and discuss it. Actually, good inter-service collaboration. So thank you, Federico. Questions?
Thanks. That was very interesting.
I was having difficulty figuring out how to present this because there's a shortage of worked examples. That's the only example of applying this method to code words instead of individual letters in like a Civil War era magic square encipherment by letter. Lots of books have pictures of the method of differences, frequently stealing the same example with 8801, which is a 4-digit code, not a 5-digit code, but it works the same. But only that one book had the code words representing different things. It's the neat thing is it's roughly the same algorithm using Kirchhoff's method of superimposition and symmetry of position to make inferences between multiple messages in depth that was used for 19th century unbreakable letter ciphers and the super encipherment of code words in World War II. Same algorithm. Similarly, the Army break into the Japanese diplomatic code, which was a code book that was super enciphered by transposition, not by substitution. So it fractionated the digits of I think that was a 4-digit code book, but it spread the digits out and rearranged them, and anagramming those back together is slow. Lots of trial and error anagramming to get recognizable code words. And the boss, William Friedman, thought it was going to be really hard to break. And his first 3, and then his first 3 assistants, when he was training them years before, he'd given them a World War I problem that he and the top French code breaker had only found special case solutions for, which was a fractionating transposition of a 5x5 or 6x6 grid cipher. And they could only solve it if there was repetition. And so he assigned his new students as sort of a graduation exercise for the 3 of them to work together and see if there was a general solution for this famous World War I cipher. And they found it. And one of them was on this part-time on this Japanese diplomatic cipher, and realized that the transposition of the code words was effectively the same problem, so that the same solution should apply. And now they had IBM tabulating machines. They designed a relay widget that would plug into the programming patch panel slot of the IBM tabulating machine that would allow it to reprogram itself during a run using the same telephone switching stepper relays that were used in their reproduction of the Japanese purple machine. They had to be very careful to hide it whenever the IBM repairmen came in, because they weren't allowed unauthorized attachments. This was an unauthorized attachment. And that's another case where the solution algorithm for a pencil and paper letters cipher could be applied to break the super encipherment of the multi-digit code groups. Randy says, my dad's task force would use alternating identities on different days to double their apparent size. The British Navy has had a standing order to alternate call signs on alternate days when operating in the North Sea since before 1800. The guy who I read writing that said, I think it is safe for me to disclose.
We never changed call signs in Vietnam.
Well, I mean, it was pretty obvious where you were. You come in low going thump a thump a thump, and everyone looks up. So, yeah.
Actually, the kill range for arms, the small arms, was between 50 feet and 1,500 feet. Below 50 feet, they couldn't, you're going too fast for them to get an aim at you.
Yep.
And
same problem the Hubble has looking down.
yeah.
Even if it has the resolution, it's going too fast unless it does a very carefully timed inverse rotation, the way you'd pan a camera to shoot an F1 car.
And the Hueys made the machine gun sounds. Even if you didn't have guns, you could get low level and make them think they're receiving machine gun fire.
The problem with alternating task force ID alternate days in the Pacific in World War II is that individual Morse code radio operators had individual characteristics on what radio operators call their fist. Not that you should pound the key with a fist, but some guys sounded like they were pounding the key with a fist, and some people were just smooth, and some people had an odd tempo on certain letters, all of which a person using their wetware modem to copy the traffic could copy the malformed letters just fine, but they could also recognize that's my friend Charlie if it was a friendly station, or that's the guy whose call sign was something else yesterday. And they'll put a note on the intercept saying FIST indicates this call sign today equals that call sign yesterday, which is input for the traffic analysis branch that correlates all the call signs a given unit is used and which directions the radio direction finding had on that call sign today to get crossing lines on a map. Even without code breaking, the traffic analysis and radio direction finding could do a pretty good job of getting an order of battle and sometimes even in intent. If supply ships are moving in this direction, they may have felt they got away with it. I haven't seen a TICOM equivalent for post-war counterintelligence analysis of Japanese intelligence capabilities. So I don't know if their signals intelligence was as good as American, British, and German. Everybody else in that war was not fooled by changing call signs. Everybody changed call signs. Not fooled by changing call signs because they recognized radio operator Charlie and radio operator Fred were both on the Essex. And if it sounded like one of them was the Essex, whatever their call sign was. And I don't know if Japan had that. Their radio intercept operators not being fluent in English, not being old-time ham radio DXers, but trained for the role, might not have tumbled to it. I don't know. The hacker mindset of radio men in the Allied intercept forces, it was it was obvious to them.